So firstly, welcome. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your patience. And let's get going. Takeaway points from the webinar that I would like you to take away. If this is the only thing you remember, I think it was worth it to keep in mind these takeaway points. Removing waste from any process in manufacturing or administration will improve throughput and quality. And I think it's extremely important that you also realize that if you take waste out of your system or out of your process, your quality will automatically improve. So it's not only throughput time, but also quality. And waste is defined as any action that does not add value, nor is required from a legal or compliance perspective. Secondly, the short interval control is the key to unlocking capacity in any process. Short interval control is not there to force people to work harder, but it is there to pick up and highlight problems and issues as soon as possible. This is very important. People always say, as soon as you speak about short interval control, oh, we're trying to get people to work harder. That's not the case. We actually want to work cleverer. That means we want the problems to come to the surface so we can resolve problems and people can work better and get a better output, but not necessarily working harder, actually just doing what they're supposed to do. And clear and ongoing communication from the top, especially where the union is involved. There's union involvement, is key to the success of improving manufacturing and operations. I've seen this firsthand, that if you involve the union from day one and there's clear and open and honest communication from the top, that they will support you and that the project will succeed in the end of the day. But like we've said in the previous webinars as well, communication is key to any change management. In the previous one, we had partnerships and networking, and let's just quickly recap what we said that before we start with today's webinar. Partnerships can only work and last if they are win-win. No legal agreement will and can save a partnership if it is not built on a win-win foundation. That means there needs to be trust, there needs to be win-win. Because if you go into any partnership and the one side wins and the other side loses, that partnership will not last. A company cannot be everything to everybody, but it has the ability to grow its share of wallet with important customers by forming partnerships. That meaning you're forming partnerships, you get products and services from other companies to go with yours to important customer of yours. That means you get a bigger share of wallet from your customer and the customer becomes more and more dependent on you. And businesses will always be between people. Doesn't matter who says what. The better you network, the more you understand the needs and wants of your customers, as well as seeing opportunities you would otherwise not be aware of. So networking, although everybody doesn't like networking, networking is extremely important for the success of the company. Okay, let's get on with issues in manufacturing and operations. We will all agree that doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome is ridiculous. I mean, this is a very old saying, and in my mind, the question I've got is then why do some managers do exactly that? They carry on with firefighting and we do not correct the issues that cause the fires. So if we stop doing firefighting and actually focus on break that habit of firefighting and focus on what causes the issues, then we will definitely improve the system, what we're doing. Okay, let's start with it. What is waste? Let's define waste before we discuss waste. Any action that does not add value, nor is required from a legal compliance perspective. Now, in lean methodology, value can be determined by asking three very simple questions. The first question, is the customer willing to pay for activity? Let's start there. You've got a widget and you drill an additional hole into that widget because you think customers might use that. Now, if customers are prepared to pay for that additional hole, then you're adding value. If they're not prepared to pay for that additional hole, that additional hole is useless and it does not add value to the widget, and that means you must stop doing it. Simple. Is the customer willing to pay for the activity? Does the activity transform the good or service? So that means in your manufacturing, is it part of the transformation of the product, the activity that you're doing? If it's not, then it's waste. Is the activity done for the first time? Means if any activity is repeated, that means it's not adding value and it is waste. Now, if the answer on any of these three questions is no, and the activity is not done from a legal or compliance perspective, then the activity does not add value and is defined as waste. So waste is a very simple definition, Three questions, any one is no, and it's not legal or compliance, then it is waste. A common mistake made by many people is to see company procedures as law. Company procedures must be questioned and to see if they add value. If they don't add value, then we need to remove or change them. If they're there from a compliance perspective, it's a different story. But if they're not from a compliance perspective, then we need and must have the ability to question it. And managers must allow people to question company procedures, because we can't afford company procedures that don't add value. Now, for me, a comparison is waste is like running hurdles in a 100-meter sprint. Now, if you take two athletes that has got comparable times in the 100-meter sprint, and we say to the one, okay, we're going to put in 1 or 2 hurdles in your lane, and you must go over those hurdles while your competitor runs without hurdles. Who do you think will win? Logic, the person without hurdles. So waste is like putting in hurdles in our processes and our systems. If we don't get rid of them, we will never beat our competitors. We will always be the last one to get to the finishing line. There is 6 types of waste. Let's quickly just list them and then we'll discuss each of them. Waiting. Waiting for material, waiting for information, waiting for approval. That's all type of waste, waiting. Motion, transportation. Getting up to go and fetch something or transporting a piece of material from point A to point B, and then from point B back to point A, that is waste. So we must make sure we've got the material and everything we need where we need it. Rework, repeating things. That's very logic. Nobody wants to repeat something or rework something because that's waste. Overproduction or excessive inventory is waste in a company. We don't want to produce things when we don't need them. You want to produce things when you actually need them and when the customer needs them. Processing, really the variance in processing. And if you've got too big a variance in your processing, that variance is waste, because then you must throw away or discard or rework quite a lot of your product. And intellect. Intellect might sound very funny to say that's waste, but how many companies use the intellect that's actually in the company? And if you don't use the intellect, that is waste. So let's take these 6 and analyze each one a bit better. Waiting. Any person waiting for information, approval, or material to continue his or her job is defined as waiting and is defined as waste. This is normally a type of waste that is easily recognizable. When you walk into an office, let's call it a finance office, and you're seeing somebody sitting doing nothing or having coffee or playing games, and you go to them and say, why aren't you working? And they tell you, I can't work because I'm waiting for this information, or I'm waiting for approval. That is waste. In manufacturing, if the production is waiting for design, waiting for material, that's waiting and that's waste. The root cause is not always determined, which result in this type of waste remaining. We see people getting used to, I'm always waiting for this material. So it becomes a norm to wait for that material. But that norm is costing the company money. By encouraging employees to record the waiting time and the reason therefore on a daily basis, and then analyzing it maybe on a weekly basis, would clearly highlight to you where the problems in the company lie. But that's one thing we don't want to do. We don't want to record our waiting time, because then we'll get somebody in trouble. That is something the culture of the company needs to change, and this recording of waiting time is extremely important, because that can highlight to you where the actual problems are lying. Motion, transportation. An example of this is material being unnecessarily moved around. Let's take an example in the office. If we've got a photocopy machine that's in the corner of the office and everybody needs to walk there to make a photocopy, why don't we put the photocopy machine in the middle of the office? That means everybody is much closer to it and there's much less time wasted. Or we get 2 photocopy machines. People will say, no, but the cost of the photocopy machine. But take that and compare it with the time wasted when people walk around, because they don't only walk to the photocopy machine, then they also walk back and start having discussions with people on the way back. So that is wasted time. This is one of the easiest forms of waste to remove. Workspace layouts is the big culprit. And in manufacturing, and we'll go through a real example just now, workspace layouts can make a huge difference. And the cost of something like that is not as big as people think. When you get your own staff to assist you and you move things around, and that you can do good workout layouts and make it extremely good for people to move as little as possible and for everything to be there, and the impact is dramatic. Another culprit is work methods. We don't always take the best practice and put it in our documentation. I challenge 99.9% of companies out there that tell me, when somebody joins your company, you take your ISO documentation, you give it to that person, and the new person will know exactly what to do. We expect people, co-workers, to assist that person, to tell them what to do and how it should be done. But if we're in manufacturing and I need to teach somebody next to me how to do something, do you think I'm going to give all my trade secrets to that person? And that person, with more energy and younger than I am, can manufacture things quicker than I can. And that means I might be retrenched at the end of the day. So people tend to keep the trade secrets. And if we don't put those in documentation and get our ISO documentation and procedures actually up to scratch, and that a new person can read them and know what to do, then we haven't succeeded. This is definitely a big culprit of motion and transportation issues. Minimizing this waste will not only improve the throughput dramatically, but will also improve quality. And I will show you in the real example how much quality was improved by just getting rid of some of the waste. Rework, repeating. I mean, that goes without saying. That is a form of waste. Actions repeated because it was not done correctly in the first place, or repeating the approval process without it adding value. And I've put in this approval process in here, and I would like to discuss it because it's a big bugbear of mine. We have always got time to redo things, but we haven't got time to do it correctly the first time. Like I said, one of the biggest culprits is the approval process, and let's have a discussion with it. We've all got limits of authority that errs towards the lower side. Now I'm saying let it err towards the higher side. because then you give junior people more authority, but also responsibility and accountability. As a manager, you need to sign orders, 10 orders a day. That means 50 orders a week. You haven't got time to go through each order properly when you approve it. That means, as a MD, I sometimes said, I'll approve this because the financial director approved it. So you don't really approve it, what is expected of you. So in this case, what I'm saying is, let's make the limits higher. Expect the person to do not 10 per day, but 1 per day. That means 5 per week. And that 5 can be done thoroughly. And then randomly do maybe 2 or 3 a week properly. That means randomly go into the system and select an order every second day of lesser value that you don't need to approve, but approve it. That means go through it and make sure it's done correctly and approve that order. In that way, you will do a much better job, number one. People won't know what you will approve and won't approve. That means there's a less chance of corruption or a bigger chance of actually catching people that's doing things incorrectly. And you will also find out where the system is actually flawed. And then that can be corrected and you can speed up the processes. So let's think logically about approval. If we do it that way, we can also show the external auditors as well as the ISO auditors that we've actually done our job properly because you are improving the processes the whole time. Overproduction, excessive inventory, producing too many components or producing them too soon, keeping more inventory than is required. And the example I'm going to show you will highlight to you the impact of getting rid of this big cultural change in a company. Because we do not allow labor to sit idle and wait for material. Have you ever seen a works manager or a production manager walking through a factory, looking at people sitting there reading newspaper during working time and not saying anything? Well, I'll show you an example where this has happened and the person was by right allowed to read newspaper because of an issue. And that is, so the biggest cultural change here is not from the person doing the work, but actually from management perspective. Because at times it's better to allow a person to sit idle and not work than doing things that is just overproducing or you're producing things when you don't need it. To overcome this waste, production lines must be stopped and problems resolved before they're allowed to continue. So when you've got a production line running and there is a material that's incorrect or a design issue, the whole production line must stop. We connected a buzzer and an alarm system and a flashing light that went off. That means the whole company knew that there was a problem on the production floor. The production would not continue until that problem was resolved. That means everybody from MD right through the company, every department involved would be involved resolving the problem because there is a problem that needs to be resolved. It highlights your problems, and that means people know if those problems are there, it will be highlighted. So people are much more prepared to ensure that those problems aren't on the production line. This worked like a bomb. A bomb might be the wrong word to use here, but I'm telling you, it blew up all the problems we had, and we started resolving problems that made our production work much better. This is the example. This is an area with small distribution transformers. Now, people that know distribution transformers, in this area, we made up to 315 kVA, 11 kV distribution transformers. This is how it looked before the time. Now you can see the amount of work in progress because there was some problems with maybe material or a design or something. So we made other components, other windings, not to let the people stand idle. Now, if you worked in this section, would you be proud of working in this section? And would the quality of your work actually be good? I doubt it. After we address the four wastes that we just spoke about: waiting, transportation, overproduction, and now I forgot the fourth one, but all four we addressed here. This is how it looked afterwards. What did it cost us? The rollers were brought in new. The rest was there. You just couldn't see them amongst the work in progress. Now, this is a huge change. Anybody working in this space, what do you think of the quality of workmanship that came out after this was done? Not by retraining the people, but they were more proud of what they were doing. They were proud of their environment, where they were working, and the quality of work increased dramatically. So let's look at the actual results by eliminating the four types of waste. We produced 15 transformers per day with 25 people working roughly 1 1/3 shifts per day. So 15 transformers, 25 people, 1 1/3 shifts per day. After 3 months after implementing this waste elimination, we got 18 transformers produced by 22 people in a single shift. The target was 18 transformers with 20 people, and after 12 months, we actually got 20 transformers manufactured with 20 people. Now that in anybody's books is a big achievement. Now, you'd say, okay, you reduce the people. That means a union issue. We reduce the people by natural nutrition. We agreed right up front with the unions that we will not retrench anybody based on this process. Nobody would be retrenched. If there is other market conditions that impact us, then yes, there isn't a market out there or whatever, or the market shrunk heavily, then we would retrench. But due to this process, we will not do it. That was natural nutrition that took the 25 to 22, because also there was people that weren't working, and now it was clear to everybody if a person isn't doing what they're supposed to do. What we also said is, if you've produced your 18 transformers, that production line, whole production line, they could go home when it was finished. They would be paid for the full shift, and our shift ended at 4, and on many occasions, people went home at 3 o'clock. But we also had an agreement with them that after 6 months, we will start changing the target to 19 and then to 20 units that they accepted. We made the 20 units, and even the 20 units were made within a shift, and people still at times went home earlier, and we paid them for the full shift. That means, yeah, win-win relationship. We formed a partnership with our labor, and it was win-win. So the partnership worked. Also, if there's a test failure, that will go back into that cell, because what I showed you here is a cell, and there's 4 of these cells together with the assembly area and testing area and tanking area. And each cell had the 4 people. So that's the 16 people, and then the rest on the rest of the production line. So each cell made just over 4 transformers a day. And the real bottleneck, you would say, would be at assembly and testing at the end of the day. But if there was any failure, that would go into the cell where that produced the failure. And they needed to correct the failure within their production time. That means if they needed to work a bit of overtime, They were not paid for it because they made a mistake and they needed to correct it. That was accepted by the union and by the people. Look at the results that we got. Ratio failures went from 10.8% to 0.1%, and after 12 months remained at 0.1%. Test failure rate went from 3% to 1%, and after 12 months it was even lower at 0.6%. And I can tell you, even after 2 or 3 years, the failure rate was less than 0.6%. Throughput time, 33.5 days went to 4.5 days, went to 4 days. How we measure this is we put stickers on material that was issued from the stores into production. And when that material ended in finished goods, that was the throughput time. And it was randomly put on certain materials. And we did those measurements over a 3-month period to have a look at what the average was. Look at the on-time delivery from 60% to 99% to 100%. That means 40% of the orders were always late. Now, none orders late. The biggest impact, finished goods inventory went from 375 units to 75 and went a bit worse to 100, and it was maintained around 100, just a bit below 100 for the next couple of years. Work in progress, the equivalent of 212 units, that is all the waste that you were seeing there on the table. That's all work in progress. Coils that's not needed. But again, we couldn't allow our people to stand idle, so we made things that we had material and designs for incorrect. And we were still 60% of the time on time, 40% late. So here we went from 212 units to 71 units to 68 units. So if you take the finished goods and work in progress was 587 units to 168 units. How much cash was released in this process? A huge amount. So our customers are happy because we've got 100% on-time delivery. The company is happy because it's got 168 units in inventory and not 587 units. So there's a lot of money released. And our workers is happy because the work environment is much better, their quality is better, and it's a win-win for everybody. And they still, in the end, went home earlier, and we were happy to let them go home earlier because we made 20 units a day, where before that we made 15, and it cost us a lot more money to make. So that's addressing the first four wastes. And it is really, it's the waiting, it is the motion and transportation, it is the rework and repeating, and it is the overproduction and excessive inventory that we addressed there. So a lot of work went in there, but the results paid back whatever. We didn't have any consultants come in there. We actually did it ourselves because we had one person that came from our other company that had a lot of lean experience that did some training internally, and we implemented it. So if you get somebody to come into your company, assist you with the training of your people, because your people know the best what can be done and what can't be done, and let the workers do the changes. Our workers did the changes. We paid them overtime on Saturday, on weekends, to actually come in and do some of the changes. And it was really a team effort to get it done. Now let's address the last two types of waste, the processing waste. Either over-processing something or having too great a variance in the process. This type of waste is the most difficult to reduce or eliminate. But let's go back to the example that I've just shown you. In the example, we said that the ratio failures went from 10.8% to 0.1%. So with the ratio testing and the failure rate shows you that we've reduced the processing waste by eliminating the first four types of waste. So By doing that first, now you can start looking at the variances, the 0.1% failure rate, 0.6% test failure rate, and 0.1% ratio failure rate, and really look at your equipment and at how things are done, your method provisions and things like that. Because now you're addressing the correct problem. If you've got all that waste that's causing a lot of these variances, it's very difficult to address. You must first eliminate them, and then you can really get stuck in with this. Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma is used today to successfully remove this waste. But I still maintain, remove the first four, and then your processes and your Lean Six Sigma can be used to ensure that you eliminate whatever further processing variances you have that's unacceptable. Intellect. For me, a very interesting one, because I don't believe companies spend enough time on this. Failure to use the capability and capacity of the people. Too many times we find capable people not being challenged and developed within the company. This is a type of waste that very few companies actually recognize and consciously correct. By addressing this type of waste proactively will reduce the employee turnover and improve overall morale in the company, something that companies desperately need in today's times. Now, where do I believe the biggest waste in intellect waste lies? I believe, and if there is middle management on this webinar, I believe middle management is the most responsible for this type of waste. Middle management does not challenge the people below them and make sure that they are trained well and that we actually use their capabilities and that they've got a career path ahead of them. Because middle management are scared of those people taking their jobs. I always said, I want capable and strong people below me because they will make me look good and I can be promoted and then they can be promoted. I think we need to get our middle management to have a different mindset, and then we can get rid of this waste and actually use people for what they are capable of and train people so we get the full benefit of their abilities. Let's go over to short interval control, something that's very interesting. Based on my 19 years of manufacturing experience, which include lean manufacturing and Lean Six Sigma training and implementations, the single biggest issue that even international companies battle with is short interval control. I've been in many manufacturing facilities on a global basis. Transformer facilities, switchgear facilities in India and China, in Europe, in Africa. And I can tell you, this is one of the things that even international companies battle with, and that I cannot understand why they battle with it as much as they do. If you can get this right, you have successful manufacturing and operational processes. At least 4 of the 6 types of waste can be focused on when short interval control is implemented. That means you can make sure that when you've removed that waste, it doesn't come back. Short interval control means putting a control in with an hourly, daily target that must be met, depending if you're doing it in finance, if you're doing it in sales, if you're doing it in manufacturing, your time frame will be different. Take a time frame that makes sense. Short interval control is seen as a very negative concept by labor, and in actual fact, it should be just the opposite, because it highlights problems in the areas, not necessarily caused by the people doing the job, but by other circumstances. Short interval control is not only for manufacturing, but also for any other operation. In the sales webinar, it was mentioned that short interval control is important to prevent chaos at the end of the month. How many companies at the end of the month go to the salespeople and say, we're short of our target, we need to get sales, go out there and get us orders. Now, Why do we wake up in the last week of the month? We should have known this after the first week of the month. So what I'm saying is our short interval control can assist even in sales. If we've got a salesperson needs to sell 100,000 Rand or order, you must get order intake of 100,000 Rand per month. We take that 100,000 Rand and we break it up and we say, okay, 20,000 for week 1, 20,000 for week 2, 30,000 for week 3, 30,000 for week 4, because we know companies order a lot of product to be delivered in the beginning of the next month. So they place the order quite late in the month. So let's not make it 25, 25, 25, 25, but let's make it 20, 20, 30, 30. So we're fair on the salesperson. After week 1, the salesperson comes back with only 10,000 sold. Now we need to ask the question, has the salesperson got the ability and is he trained to do sales properly? I believe, and I've said it in the sales webinar as well, that salespeople are most probably the worst trained people we've got in the company. So let's train the people in sales techniques and not to annoy customers. Like when you're answering the phone and they say, thanks for asking. Very annoying things, and we make sure that they don't do it, that they understand how to visit customers, how to speak less when they're with customers. But short interval control says after week 1, you'll know you've got a problem. So you don't wake up in week 4 trying to rectify the problem. Now you've got 3 weeks to rectify the problem rather than 3 days. It is important to put short interval control in place to ensure that manufacturing operations are enhanced with continuous improvement. If you've got short interval control, let's go back to distribution transformers. You saying you want 20 transformers in a day, that means you split your day in 4, and after a quarter of the time, you need to see the progress. So you know that you're going to get 20 at the end of the day. You can't wake up an hour before the shift is finished and realize that, oh, well, we're only going to get 10 and not 20 because there was a problem and nobody actually highlighted the problem. So put short interval control in that makes sense. With sales, it might be a week. I also see people in sales getting targets, a yearly target. And nobody breaks that target down and say we expect in first quarter or per month this. I'm saying you need to go weekly, not monthly or 6 monthly or yearly. That's the only way to manage people properly. Then lastly, we come to communication. With any type of change within the organization, communication is one of the most critical aspects that determines the overall success of the initiative, of the intervention. Communication is absolutely critical. And I think one of the things we totally underestimate and we don't do enough of. Most, if not all, manufacturing companies have trade unions involved. So why don't we, when we want to do these things, call the trade union in, tell them what the position is, what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to achieve it, and let's work together with them. I did it in one company at 3 sites with 3 different trade unions, and all 3 bought into the process. Why? Because number 1, senior management engaged with them before we started the process. We gave them feedback on a continuous basis to a point where when we spoke to them and told them what happened, they would just say, yes, we know. And there wasn't very much discussions. They bought into the process because they saw the benefit of what we were trying to do to make the company sustainable, to ensure their people have got jobs, and to make the whole environment for their people much better. So we need to start communicating early and continuously, and not by the HR person, but actually by senior management with the unions. So in summary, removing waste from any process in manufacturing or administration operations will improve throughput and quality. We saw there in that example that I showed you, throughput was improved tremendously, but the quality was improved as well. And it was due to removing waste. Waste is defined as any action that does not add value. Remember the 3 questions, nor is required from a legal compliance perspective. Short interval control is the key to unlocking capacity in any process. Short interval control is not there to force people to work harder, but it is there to pick up and highlight problems and issues as soon as possible. Clear and ongoing communication from the top, especially where there is union involvement, is key to the success of improving manufacturing and operation. And for that matter, is the key to success of any change initiative. If you're interested in this presentation, the PowerPoint, as well as a Word write-up on this, you're welcome to contact Nuran on this email address. And if there is any other further questions that we don't answer today, but you think of later on, you're welcome to contact her. She will put me in contact with you and we can address the questions. I thank you for your time. Mark, if there's any questions that they would like to ask, I'm more than happy to answer some questions. Let's just find out what's happened to Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Leon, how are you? Can you hear me?
Okay, thanks.
Excellent stuff. So, Leon, I know you've got 1 or 2 other lectures coming up. Can you give us an indication of what might be coming up in the next few weeks and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we will also do a bit on finance, a bit on procurement. I think that is the next 2 that's coming up. So really looking at how you interpret financial statements for the benefit of your company and running a company, making sure that you work the balance sheet to make sure you get free cash, you free your cash and things like that. And also procurement. You know, there's a couple of basics that we need to get right in procurement to make sure that there's no fraud and things like that within procurement. I think that's always very difficult and in the times we live in, very difficult to do. But I think it's clear that there's a lot of things we can do in procurement to improve procurement.
Excellent.
So it's procurement and finance will be the next 2 that we will address.
Brilliant stuff. We will announce those dates soon. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. We will send out the presentation, and if you wish to chat more to Leon, we've got a form which you can just send to Leon. We'll provide you with the email address.
I've just given them Nuran's email address.
I see.
So if they can send it to her, then we will get it from her. Okay,
excellent stuff. So, and also we should remind people that your lectures on marketing and sales are already online and can be viewed at CIFSA's YouTube site as well. This recording will also be going up in due course as well, and everybody will receive the slides. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Leon.
Is there any questions that people have got while we're on?
Okay, let me just have a look. There's not too many people have asked questions on the chat. Everybody was just asking whether the slides will be available, and I've just answered them already. But let's give anybody a chance to ask any questions.
If you just raise your hand,
yeah,
then we can also give you a chance to ask questions.
Okay, doesn't look like anybody's raising their hand at this point in time, but I think everybody knows how to contact you now, Leon. So so I think let's leave it up to that process, and we'll send out the presentation and also those forms and Nuran's email address as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for your time,
okay,
and
Leon,
enjoy the rest of the day.
You'll just have to stop the webinar from your side because you're the host. All right, thanks.